And welcome to the third session of BBFA support. The session this evening concludes a trio of sessions, so I say looking at the FA's disciplinary procedures and misconduct processes. Beyond this, the sessions will continue on a monthly basis, but we'll look much more around other aspects of club management away from the disciplinary procedures. As with the previous sessions, I'd expect this one to last about an hour. I'll try to keep it to that time as much as possible. I hope you do find it useful. To work. Bear with me 1 second. There we go. So this session, as I said, it looks at misconduct processes and disciplinary hearings under the FA. Over the course of the evening or the next hour or so, I'm going to just cover off the underlying principles behind the FA's procedures and also the regulations. So apologise in advance if it's a little bit wordy and heavy at the beginning. I'll then look at what that process looks like in practice and just do a practical demonstration again around the whole game system, how to respond to a misconduct charge if you receive it, how to access the documents that may have been uploaded as part of a case, and how to add a response. I'll then go and look at what a disciplinary hearing looks like in practice and then just signpost you towards some further resources later on. First of all, I just want to cover the underlying principles that kind of form the bedrock of the FA's disciplinary procedures. Over them in total, just coming up on the screen. So the real core tenets underpinning all of this, we want to make sure that the process is fair, there is consistency across all decisions, that any sanctions that are imposed are both appropriate to the offence and proportionate, particularly for the level of football. And where possible, we want to make sure it's all underpinned by an education programme. I'm going to come to fairness at the end because that's really the key one. Just quickly touch on the other four sections here. Consistency is obviously key. We want to make sure that when we look at a disciplinary offence across the country, that similar sanctions and decision-making processes are being applied no matter what county you may be in or what level of the game is involved. There are, of course, some differences between the professional game and grassroots. We are looking at professional level, it comes much more towards an employment process as opposed to a straightforward volunteer disciplinary process. But generally, we try to make sure there's consistency around the way that all county FAs and the national FA deal with disciplinary procedures. As I say, we want to make sure that sanctions are both appropriate to the offence and proportionate. It may, as we all know, it's a caution in grassroots football is a £10 admin fee or fine. It probably isn't proportionate to then charge a player for Manchester City £10 for picking up a caution. So we want to make sure that the level of fines imposed are proportionate. Actually, we also want to make sure that they are appropriate to the level of offence. For that reason, as you might imagine, a red card for serious foul play or for violent conduct is deemed much more serious and a much worse level of offence than, say, denying a goal-scoring opportunity or picking up a second booking in the match. Therefore, we want to make sure that the punishment fits the crime, as it were, and that the sanction is appropriate for that level of violence or that level of offence. Education is also key. That education includes sessions such as this, wanting to make sure that clubs, teams, players, referees, leagues are aware of disciplinary procedures and sanctions, but also, if it's possible, to look at education as a form of punishment's the wrong word, but as a form of sanction that's imposed, that actually a player or a club's required to attend an education session to try to prevent repeat offences or incidents occurring again throughout the season. Where possible, we will look to impose that. And underpinning each of those other aspects is fairness. It's really key to us, and it's a case of fairness to all parties. We want to make sure that we're fair to the victim of one of these offences, whether that's just the victim of a foul tackle, or at the higher level, and more serious offences if it's the victim of, say, discriminatory abuse. We want to make sure we're fair to them. Equally, we want to make sure we're fair to the player or the club official or the club that's been accused of making that offence. To make sure that, as I said, everything we do is underpinned by these 5 principles. Official wheel, for want of a better term, from the FA, And there is one other underlying principle as well, which I want to touch on briefly, which is looking at making sure that these matters are dealt with in a timely manner. Timeliness is key, particularly if we're looking at sanctions which could actually prevent somebody participating in football. That applies whether we're looking at it from a professional level or from a grassroots level. There's a sporting sanction at stake, and as I said, we may be preventing someone from playing a game that they love. As much as possible, the penalty needs to be implemented as close to the offence as possible to make sure that that penalty is appropriate and relevant to the offence that's been committed. Occasions where this is more crucial than others. So the key ones here, we're looking at making sure that we're particularly timely when it comes to serious offences, particularly against match officials, where there is an impact on a competition, so where a game may have been abandoned or where players played under suspension and therefore the competition may take further action over the outcome of a game, and where young players are involved. The reason we need to make sure we're timely for young players is that it has actually been proved that for younger children in particular, the cause needs to be relevant to the effect. So if you suspend a player 6 months down the line for an offence they've committed, age groups, they're not going to necessarily associate that punishment with the offence that's been committed. Whereas actually, if you say to a child, you've committed this, now you cannot play, it'll have a much bigger impact and will go a much longer way to making sure they don't re-offend. Looking at the timelines involved, there are three key ones for us. First is that as a county FA, we have to raise a charge for misconduct within 90 days of the offence being reported to us. So about 3 months, give or take. To make sure that that charge has been resolved within 180 days of the offence being committed and reported to us. Said for some of those more priority cases, we actually have to look at turning these cases around within 28 days. So if a match is abandoned, we need to have closed all of our misconduct procedures for that by 28 days later. Same applies for playing under suspension. Say is that the 90 and 80-day thresholds are maximum time limits. It's a huge amount of time when you think about it. We effectively have 3 months to complete an investigation and raise charges, and 6 months to resolve it and implement any sanctions. Now, I just said that timeliness is crucial to us. Where possible, and as much as possible, we try to make sure we go nowhere near those lengths of time. On average, over last season, we raised the charge within 10 days of an incident being reported to us. And the average time it took us to actually close that case, to hear the charges, and to hand out any sanctions was actually at 39 days. We want to make sure it is relevant to the case and actually any sanctions are handed out in a timely manner. Really, we're looking to try to get our resolution time down to about 35 days, in effect 5 weeks from the date of the offence. The reason we do have such long timeframes, though, is sometimes these cases are quite complicated and there is a lot going on here. So we need a little bit of time to make sure we can investigate it fully, get to the bottom of what may have happened. And then sometimes once we've raised the charge, actually events can conspire, shall we say, that can mean that it's a while before we can hear the case. If there's a case which has got multiple charges in it and multiple witnesses that need to be brought together to consider the case at a hearing, you might imagine if you're trying to get 10, 11 people in a room, it can take a long time to make sure you've got a date where everybody's available. So about 90 and 180 days just gives us a little bit of caution. By and large, we are looking to try to get these turned around as quickly as possible and within 35 days this season. I want to move on now to look at the underlying regulations that kind of that give us the authority to take action when it comes down to impacting people's participation in football. It's all available in the FA handbook, and that is what we refer to here at the office, at least, as kind of our Bible. I always joke that any question that comes up, we should be able to find the answer in it. It's a 600-page brick of a book that I've managed to successfully memorize about half of at this stage. So looking at those underlying regulations, this is FA Rule E1. The association may act against a participant in respect of any misconduct, which is a breach of laws of the game, fair enough, rules and regulations of the FA, and I'll pick out a couple of rules E3 to 28 in a minute, statutes of UEFA and FIFA, rules and regs of an affiliated association or competition, and any order, requirement, direction, or instruction of the association. Participating in affiliated football by signing up to play for a club, and by that club then affiliating with the county and taking part in one of our leagues. Everybody that takes part in football effectively has agreed to be ruled by these regulations. So therefore we have that right to take action. For us then, moving on, is FA Rule E31. This is what gives us the right to then take action against a player or a match or a club official. I know this one off by heart, I have to quote it so often. The participant shall at all times act in the best interest of the game and shall not act in any manner which is improper or brings the game into disrepute, or use any one or combination of violent conduct, serious foul play, threatening, abusive, indecent, or insulting language or behaviour. Those bottom ones you may recognise are effectively red card offences. Also, if one of those offences is committed outside of a playing environment, so someone who's not on the field of play governed by the referee, we still have the right to take action against them. On a couple of key words here. First one, I've mentioned it a couple of times now, participant. What is a participant? Thankfully, the FA's defined that one for us. Participant is an affiliated association. So Berks and Bucks FA, we're a participant under the FA regulations, and the FA could take action against us. It also means a competition, a club, organisations, club officials. I'm not going to read them all out, they're all on the screen. But basically it boils down to any individual who is involved in football in any formal capacity other than as a spectator. If a spectator commits an offence, we cannot take action against them individually. However, if they do have another role, if they are a player who's also just attending a game as a spectator, we would have that ability to take action. FA employee, I'm also a participant. So again, if I were to go completely off the rails and commit one of these breaches, not only would my job be at risk, but actually I'd probably face a charge by the FA. Aspect of this I want to pick up on quickly is at all times. Now this one's an interesting one. It may make sense that, yes, we have the right to take action if a player commits an offence on the pitch. It gets away from the pitch that it gets a little bit murky, but actually the FA and the county FA does still have the right to take action. What we're not saying here is that if a player gets into a fight down the nightclub on a Friday or a Saturday night, we're going to come after them and try and raise a misconduct charge against them. However, actually, if a player's got into a fight on a Friday night with a player from another club because they're having an argument about football, and really the motivation behind the action is football related, we might look at taking action against them because suddenly that offence is football related. Equally, and this is where we do implement it, if the players come home from a game, frustrated decision, and post all over social media, mouthing off this, that, and the other, calling the referee all kinds of names under the sun, we still have the right to take action against them there for abusive language towards a match official. It may not have happened on the game, but he's a player at all times, not just when he's on the field of play. Depending on the circumstances, depending on what's been said, the size and the scope and the reach of it, we may well take action then. Participant's not just a player, it can be a club, and the catch-all for that falls under E20 as well. And Club Secretaries, you may well have seen these charges come out. I've mentioned them in previous sessions. The FA Rule E20, each affiliated association, competition and club is responsible for ensuring directors, players, officials, people involved with them, do not commit any of the acts we previously mentioned, whilst attending at or taking part in a match in which it's involved, whether on its own ground or elsewhere. I'm going to pick out a couple of things here. It's the conduct of players, officials, spectators, and all people purporting to be its supporters. And it is raised if there is, or it is a requirement that they conduct themselves in an orderly fashion. Is that if there is misconduct to the game committed by spectators, County FA, we would take action against the club for the conduct of those spectators. The club has failed to control them. Equally, if there is a mass brawl or mass confrontation on the field of play that's led to the abandonment, chances are we will raise a charge, again, under FA Rule E20 because the club's failed to ensure that its players and officials, potentially spectators, have conducted themselves in an orderly fashion. Used for accumulation of offences throughout the season, as we've discussed in previous sessions. On briefly, I think these are the last few regulations you'll be pleased to know. G1, misconduct under FA Rule E1 is dealt with by the association or an affiliated association on its behalf. This is what gives us the right as the county to take action. We've been delegated the responsibility of enforcing these regulations. Step 5 or Tier 3 of the men's and women's pyramids, respectively. D3B, competition shall not act before the association or affiliated association acts. Now, some of these offences, as I said, if a match has been abandoned due to the conduct of one or both teams, or if a player is played under suspension, impacts the competition. And so the league would look to take action against the club as well, so that the points for the game are awarded appropriately and the integrity of the competition is not at stake. The competition must wait until the county has dealt with this before they can act. And this is really why the timeframes for those kinds of offences are so tight. It's why we are required now to make sure that any abandoned game is ruled on by the county FA within 28 days of the match being taken. We don't want to leave the competition hanging and the outcome of a league potentially or a cup competition to be delayed by several months whilst the county is taking action. Theory behind it. Those are all the regulations. What does it actually look like in practice? What is that misconduct process? It has to be reported to us. By and large, this will happen. The referee will submit a report to the county through the whole game system following a match. It could be reported to us by one of the clubs as a complaint against a participant from the opposition club, whether that's, say, language or behaviour of an opposition manager or an incident that's happened which the referee just wasn't party to. Get reviewed by the football services team, either by myself or Chris Penny, who is our investigations officer. First of all, do we think that actually a misconduct breach has occurred? That's our first threshold. Has someone acted against one of those FA regulations? If they have, we'll then move on to an investigation phase. At that point, we will request additional information if we need to from the referee. If there's something in their report that we think is missing, or we just want a little bit of clarification on, and we might contact the clubs and individuals involved, just requesting observations from them. We're doing this more and more, particularly for some of those larger incidents, because actually, all has happened, for example, has to have started from somewhere. Or if a player's just gone ahead and thumped a spectator or an opposition manager or opposition player, there may be a reason for it. So actually, has misconduct been committed by somebody else, which has then caused that reaction? We want to try and find that out at this stage. Satisfied that we have evidence that a misconduct breach is likely to have happened, we will raise a misconduct charge, and the club is then notified through the whole game system, and it goes over to the club to respond. The threshold we're trying to meet here is, and it's a horrible phrase, I do apologise for that, is we have to be confident that a charge will be successful. So in effect, it has to get through the threshold that we think it's more likely than not that it's happened. It will ultimately be ruled upon by an independent panel. However, what we don't want to do is raise charges that we, for instance, actually we don't think we have enough evidence to suggest has happened on any participants. What kind of charges will we raise here at the County FA? Fortunately, the offences are still committed against match officials. However, if you think that player-on-player offences, for the most part, are dealt with by the referee through the standard disciplinary process, it may make sense that actually there may be the victim then of these extraordinary incidents that happen outside of that standard disciplinary process. Against match officials will fall within one of these 4 categories: abusive language or behaviour, threatening language or behaviour, physical contact, and assault on a match official. The reason there are asterisks by the bottom 2 is if we raise a charge for one of these 2 offences, that individual will actually be placed under an immediate suspension from the point that that charge has been raised. Earlier about timeliness being important and proportionate and appropriate sanctions being imposed. This is something which has been tested legally by the FA, that actually the level of risk associated with a player that has committed an act which in a civil process may be considered assault, whether committed physical contacts on a match official, the level of risk associated means that if we're confident that that incident may have happened, it's appropriate that they are taken out of the football environment until a commission has ruled on that. Equally, We then have to respond to that case and get it resolved, heard by a panel within 28 days, because that is deemed to be the maximum length of time a player should be removed from the game if they haven't committed the offence. Offences which may be committed against somebody other than a match official. Again, it's very much similar kind of offences. There's general improper conduct, which is bringing the game into disrepute. Example of that might well be if a manager has removed a team from the field of play and therefore caused the abandonment of that. Only the referee can abandon a game and decide that a match should be called off. If a manager pulls that team off, that's considered bringing the game into disrepute. Equally, foul and abusive language, not towards the referee, would be covered as a misconduct charge, threatening behaviour, violent conduct, assault participant on participant, so that could be a player on player, coach on player, player on coach, so forth. And the final one is rare, but we do have the option to raise a charge if we believe that the existing sanction for a red card is clearly insufficient. As we said, if it's something that actually would breach into assault, so a punch that has caused serious bodily injury, we'd raise an assault charge. However, let's say that a player just flies off the handle and it's been tackled, but actually he goes ahead and commits acts of violent conduct on multiple players, so punches 3 opposition players. Card gets a 3-game ban. Actually, that player's committed multiple acts of violent conduct. A 3-game ban is an appropriate sanction for multiple incidents, versus a player who may get sent off in a 3-game ban for 1 punch on 1 player. It's an occasion where we would probably raise a charge that existing sanction for dismissal is clearly insufficient because there have been repeat offences committed. We have the option to raise club charges under FA Rule E20 if they fail to ensure their players, officials, spectators conduct themselves in an orderly manner. E20B is a charge if they've failed to ensure spectators didn't enter the field of play, but those spectators then didn't commit any other acts of misconduct. So if there's a pitch invasion at the end of the season, and we're feeling particularly cruel, we may raise a charge for something like that. Equally, if you have multiple acts of streakers, we may well charge for such an offence as well. Playing under suspension. In these occasions, we will raise charges against both the club and the player for failing to comply with a decision of the association. Again, these have to be resolved within 28 days to be reported to the county FA, as if a player has played under suspension, chances are that the match will be awarded to the opposition. We've seen that happen in professional football as well as in local football. And before anybody brings up Liverpool as an exception, that was a player who was not under suspension. That was a player who hasn't received international clearance, and leagues do have a discretion there as to whether to award the game or not when it comes down to player status. Right, aggravated charges. This is a terminology which the FA uses and relates to what will more commonly be considered acts of discrimination. FA Rule E32 states that breach of E31 is considered aggravated if it includes a reference, whether express or implied, to any one or more of the following. So ethnic origin, colour, race, nationality, religion or belief, gender, gender reassignment, sexual orientation or disability. Those of you who are hot on your UK laws, they are the majority of the protected characteristics under UK law, with the exception of age. I'm not going to go into that right now. So if we believe that a comment has been made that references one of those protected characteristics, we would look to raise a charge under FA Rule E32. We do not say that a player has committed an act of discrimination, saying a player is racist or is not racist. Simply looking at whether the comment that was made has been aggravated by reference to one of those characteristics. Charges fall under a slightly different format to a standard misconduct charge, where you'll receive one offence, one charge, and you'll be asked to respond, accept or deny. So for an aggravated charge, you'll actually receive 2 charges. It falls under 2 formats. First charge is, and this threshold must be considered first by the disciplinary panel, is whether the individual charge has committed improper conduct, and that constitutes foul and abusive language. that has been proven or not proven, found proven or not proven, they will consider whether that reference, that foul and abusive language, was aggravated by reference to one of those protected characteristics. It can get quite nuanced, and disciplinary panels that consider these kind of charges go through quite extensive training and further education through the FA to kind of understand some of these. But to look at it in a vague example, and hope that I do not cause offence, I do want to try to highlight some of the nuances involved here. A player has been tackled, or has a comment has been made towards a player, and he wants to report it back to the referee. And in trying to describe the player, he says, well, it's the player over there, it was the black player that made the comment. In that situation, if a charge such as this was raised, the commission would look, was the use of the phrase, the black player over there, did that constitute foul and abusive language? You might say that actually it is a legitimate description and way of identifying one player over another player to reference their colour. So therefore, that first primary charge of improper conduct, including foul and abusive language, would not have been met. The player had used a derogatory term and referenced the player's colour. In that sense, the charge of abusive language would have been met, and it would have been deemed aggravated by reference to one of those protected characteristics. As I said, it is quite nuanced, and it is why these charges are dealt with a very high level of investigation, nuance, and training by the FA. Variation of charge which you may see come up is alternate charges. Now, this is where a serious level offence has been committed and has been charged for, but there may be some doubt whether the threshold for the highest level has been met. Occasions, the county FA has the option to raise what is considered an alternate or lower charge. The charge will always be considered first, and if that is found proven, the sanctions will be issued based on that higher charge. If it's found not to be proven, however, the commission will then consider that alternate charge. If that one's proven, we issue sanctions based on that charge. If the alternate charge is then not proven, then the entire charge is dismissed and expunged. I'll explain what that means. Let's say that we believe a player may have assaulted a match official. Now, the threshold for assault on a match official is that the player has committed an act which has caused injury to that match official. There's doubt as to whether that act has caused injury, but it's pretty clear that the player has actually made physical contact with them. Say, for example, that they pushed the referee, but we're uncertain whether that push, that shove, caused an injury. We may raise that higher charge of assault on a match official, but with an alternate charge of physical contact. We do this in every occasion, and we can only do it for the three charges on the left here. It's that opportunity that, as I said, where we do believe a serious offence has been committed, that there is still justice, that if that highest threshold is not met, that the entire charge does not fail. On to a practical demonstration quickly on the whole game at this point, just to help you understand how to respond to charges that may be raised, view the information that's available, and then respond to it. On to the whole game. And initially, as before, you would land on the main club dashboard, telling you you have notifications available that misconduct charges have been raised against the club. 2 example charges on this instance. The charges you make, it has logged me up because I logged in so long ago. To access the charges, you come onto the main club dashboard, discipline panel down the left-hand side, and this will show you current charges that you need to respond to. 2 examples at this point. So the first one against myself here. Always like to raise charges against myself, makes it a bit more personal. In this instance, I've had a charge raised against me for improper conduct against a match official, including abusive language or behaviour. Down gives you me the notes, gives a bit more information. Says that having reviewed the evidence presented to the association, deemed my actions were contrary to FA Rule 3.1, my language behaviour towards match official was abusive. Download the documents associated with that at the bottom. We'll then show you loads. This is the formal charge letter that goes out. It's addressed to the club secretary. Not in this case, I'm also listed as club secretary of this demonstration club. List the participants. the fan number, and the offence. Include sanction guidelines that the Commission will refer to, so you have a vague understanding of what the likely punishment would be if it's found proven. Have the opportunity then to respond in a paper form. You can, of course, respond through the whole game system. Up at the top, click on the response button. Next page. Ask you, are you pleading guilty or not guilty? In a sense, pleading not guilty. And ask, do you wish to attend a personal hearing or have it dealt with through a non-personal hearing? I'll come on to that shortly. So everyone, a personal hearing gives me the opportunity. I can upload a response to the charge. And if you are attending a hearing, it says you can name any witnesses you're bringing. So I'm going to bring back me. Understand, and then click to submit. The charge that I raised just as an example here was one of those cases that has an alternate charge. Load again. I didn't put this against any one of members of staff because it does include an immediate suspension from all football. So we created BBFA demo as a player. You'll notice the background here is red. That is because this has imposed an immediate suspension from all football, starting from the date the charge was raised, which was yesterday. This charge was because this charge was for primary charge here of physical contact on a match official. So put in the text here that an alternate charge of improper conduct was included. We respond to this one. First level charge. We respond just to that first level charge and click submit. However, we're saying that we're not guilty of that higher level offence, physical contact. You'll see the alternate charge now pops up as an option, which is for threatening and abusive behaviour towards a match official. You have the option there to plead guilty or not guilty to that offence, whether you're requesting a personal or a non-personal hearing. Again, you can upload documents and list any witnesses for a personal hearing. Hopefully you can see it's very quick and easy responding to these charges via the whole game system. Cover what happens next, the nitty-gritty of the misconduct process. So, every charge that gets raised must be considered by a disciplinary commission. Charge will come before one of our panels. Disciplinary commissions consist of 4 individuals. We have a chair, we have 2 wing members, and we have a secretary. Individuals must have attended training by the FA within the past 2 seasons, so they will always be qualified. For every hearing, at least one of the voting members, so the chair or the 2 wing members, must be independent, so they must hold no formal role within the county FA. Cannot be a member of our ruling council or our board of directors. The secretary doesn't have a vote in the proceedings, they just make sure that everything follows according to regulations. Will be a member of staff of either our county or another county FA. There's sent case papers in advance of the hearing so that you know that when they do attend the hearing, they are aware of papers, they're aware of the circumstances around the case. They're not coming into this blind and being asked to make a decision on the spot. 2 ways of hearing or for responding to cases, as we said, requesting a personal hearing and a non-personal hearing. I'm going to mostly deal with personal hearings in this situation. Personal hearing will go before one of these panels in the same way, but they're obviously just dealing with the correspondence that's been provided. So they've got a copy of the charge, any evidence that's been collected by the county FA, the response to the charge by the player or the club, and any evidence that's been submitted afterwards. By correspondence, we tend to hold an online disciplinary hearing once a week to consider those kinds of cases. Hearing, so it's a slightly more complicated process and slightly more to it. So I'm going to describe a personal hearing process at this stage. Hearings are inquisitorial, they are not adversarial. That we don't have a prosecutor trying to argue the case to be proven. We rely purely on evidence that has been collected and the disciplinary panel's ability then to test that evidence through questions. And it's on the county FA to prove the charge by the evidence that we have provided to the panel. It is not a case that it is referee against player. If one of these charges has come through, It is not a case that the referee is out for blood, that they are trying to convince us why the charge should be found proven. They will be asked to attend a hearing purely as a witness on behalf of the county, but they are there in their duty as a match official, reporting what has happened as an impartial observer, impartial witness. They are not here prosecuting the case, for want of a better term. We must be satisfied that the alleged offence occurred on the balance of probability. A court of law, we wish we did, but we don't have access to the ability to compel people to provide evidence. We can't subpoena like the US Congress is doing to the White House at the moment. We don't have video evidence of every incident that occurs. We don't have to meet a threshold that an incident occurred beyond all reasonable doubt. The threshold we have to meet is balance of probability. It's a civil test, so it comes down to a 51-49 split. Do you believe it is more likely than not that that incident? It's more likely than not that it happened. The case is found proven. These decisions are majority decisions, so it doesn't have to be unanimous. All three panel members in agreement. Majority decision 2 against 1 will find a case proven. Doesn't want to play ball this evening. Right, personal hearings. The format for a personal hearing. Every hearing across the country should follow the same format. The FA evidence is heard. By and large, this will be match officials or whoever has brought the complaint, if it is something the match official hasn't witnessed. Any other witnesses who have provided statements in advance will be asked to attend. What we do as a county FA is bring in new evidence at the disciplinary hearing. We can only bring in evidence that the participant charged has already had sight of. Again, it wouldn't be fair to introduce new evidence on someone that is trying to defend themselves. The evidence has been heard, the defence evidence is entered. So the individual that's been charged or an individual representing the club will provide a statement explaining their version of events, and then they will have the opportunity to call any supporting witnesses that they wish. And the individual charged can bring any witnesses they want on the night. We don't have to have had prior notice. However, it is appreciated if we are aware of who will be attending, purely so that we can make sure appropriate arrangements logistically are made here in the office. Witnesses can be questioned by the panel, and the defendant, the individual that's been charged, does have the opportunity to ask questions to the match official, to any county FA witnesses, and indeed to any of their own witnesses. Evidence has been entered, individual charged or the person representing the club makes a closing statement. At that point, the commission will make a decision on the liability. So is that charge proven or not proven on the balance of probability? Proven, it's the end of proceedings. The charge is expunged and it will not stay on the player's record. It's proven, we will review the participant's disciplinary record for the last 5 years. The participant charged, the player or the club, has the opportunity to put in a plea for leniency, try to convince the panel that any sanctions imposed should be kept to an absolute minimum. The panel will then reconvene in private and decide on any sanctions that will be. Are taken by referencing not only all of the evidence that's been provided, the disciplinary record, but also guidelines set down by the FA as to appropriate sanctions for every type of offence at different levels of football. Again, making sure there's consistency and fairness across the process and across the country. The format for hearings, in a very quick overview, there's a couple of different things that may arise which I do want to cover as well. First is representation. The individual charged can be represented by somebody from the club. They can also be legally represented. So if you happen to have a lawyer within the club as a volunteer, maybe an opportunity for them to give back. Equally, if the higher levels of the game is quite common to have legal representatives. However, the county must be notified in advance. And again, this is just as a courtesy almost to make sure that as the panel, we're prepared for that. If you are being represented, whether it's by a legal representative or somebody else from within the club, that individual charged must always still be present. Ultimately, they're the person that's been charged. They have to be confident they've had a fair hearing. We have to be confident that they've had a fair hearing. They must always be present. The representative who leads the case on behalf of the individual charged cannot then also act as a witness. That's because they are aware of all evidence that's otherwise been presented. They are speaking on behalf of the individual charged, so they cannot enter their own evidence. Variation on this I want to cover is around consolidated proceedings. Now, where multiple cases arise from the same incident or fixtures, they will be heard together by one panel. Whether it's involves two different clubs in the same county, two different clubs from a different county, whether the match official's also been charged, whether it's a spectator, whether it's a player, if they all come out of the same incident and the same fixture, they will be heard together. For that is evidence from one case may well impact the decision on liability for another case. So whether it's found proven or not, and may impact the decisions around sanctions. So again, in the interest of fairness, it's only fair that all defendants have the opportunity to hear and respond to all evidence. This will be cross-shared prior to the hearing, including any written responses to charges, and any defendants requesting a personal hearing will have the opportunity to question all of the witnesses involved and indeed each other. Talk throughout the evening about serious level offences, aggravated breaches, and those which are deemed serious offences against match officials. Part of our transparency and as part of our fairness to all participants, we are now providing written reasons for some of those cases. Any aggravated breach, anything that may reference a protected characteristic, we will provide written reasons and publish them on both our website and the FA's website, explaining how the panel has reached the decision they have done over both liability and sanctions. At the start of last season, any case which is heard as a personal hearing involving a charge of assault on a match official, physical contact on a match official, threatening behaviour on a match official, the assault player on player or participant on participant, any sanction over 10 matches will also receive written reasons. That is part of our transparency, making sure that people are aware how these decisions are made, particularly where they do have such serious consequences towards player participation. And for that, under the we also have mandatory minimum sanctions that must be imposed for these serious level offences. From 112 days or 12 matches for threatening a match official, all the way up to recommended sanctions of up to 10 years for assault on a match official, or if a match official commits an act of assault on another participant. Serious level offences and serious suspensions from football here, so it's only fair that we give justification and public reasons as to why we've taken that. An aggravated breach, considering the media coverage and the sensitivity of discriminatory remarks, we will create written reasons for them, and they have a serious level of sanction involved. Now, 6 matches is an entry point, £75 fine. So the middle column here is a recommended sanction from the FA. This is what they believe is the advised suspension and sanction for one of these offences. However, if there's serious mitigating reasons, the panel can go below those recommended sanctions, but must always abide by the mandatory minimums on the right-hand side. Hearings are quite a tense experience, whether you are 15 years old or 50 years old, whether it's your first hearing, 5th hearing, 10th hearing. We try to make sure that everybody's aware of the procedures in advance, but considering the impact, particularly that they have on young people, we do have additional provisions that we put in place to make sure that it's as unthreatening and unintimidating as possible for them. Cover those quickly. So the minimum age to attend a hearing is 14 years old. We can raise charges against players younger than this, and in exceptional circumstances we will do. If they were to request a personal hearing, we would deal with this through another format. So we may deal with it as an education session, or we may request that they provide statements through their parents at a hearing itself. But that player themselves, if they're 12, 13 years old, would not be allowed to. 15 and 18 years old, if they're participating in youth football, that player or witness must be accompanied by what we call a responsible adult, so a parent or guardian. 16 to 18-year-old participating in adult football, we would generally follow the adult procedures, as that player has agreed to abide by adult regulations. However, if that participant does have a learning disability or does need special considerations, we will generally follow these provisions for young people. We're trying to take away some of the informality, effectively. So the panel will be dressed slightly more casually. Suits, ties, blazers, and so forth might be more relaxed. We will use first names when referring to all members of the panel. And we'll make sure that whilst that young person is giving their evidence, only the bare minimum people will be in the room. So the disciplinary panel, so the chair, the two wing members, and the secretary. The individual that's been charged, and their representative if they're being represented, and the young person and their responsible adult. All other witnesses will have cleared the room at that stage to make sure that it's as unintimidating as possible. The other factor that we put in is that only the chair is allowed to address the young person directly. So we try and make it more of a conversation between the chair and the chairperson and the witness, to being bombarded with questions from all sides. Questions came in 2 or 3 years ago, and by and large they have made a massive impact and made it a much easier environment for young people attending hearings. We also have a bit more discretion now to use new technology and make extra provisions if necessary. So if it is a very exceptional circumstance and actually there's fear for that young person in attending, if they're giving witness evidence against an adult, should we say, we can also look to have them attend remotely via webex. A lot of the theory and a lot of the regulations and procedures. We're trying to make sure that these webexes and sessions is also practical advice for clubs, how to manage it in the real world. So there are a couple of pointers here. Is if you're contacted by the county FA because an incident's happened, and we may be raising a misconduct charge, or if we felt we've had enough evidence in the first instance, we've just gone ahead and raised a misconduct charge straight away. First advice to a club secretary or chair would be to investigate it internally. Chances are, if your match has been abandoned, you know something has happened. So we would expect really club secretaries to actually start investigating the abandonment internally that same weekend after a match may have been abandoned. But please investigate, speak to your witnesses within the club who may have witnessed the incident, and try and get an understanding from the club's point of view as to what happened. Collect statements. If those witnesses would be prepared to attend a hearing at the county FA and provide a witness statement to us, it's really appreciated. And certainly we would expect witness statements from any key actors involved in an incident. Much has been raised. Share the evidence that's been used, particularly and essentially with a player or a manager who may have been charged with the offence, and make sure they are aware of the options around their response, that they can accept or deny the charge, and that they can request a personal hearing or for it to be dealt with by correspondence. Frustrating from our point of view when we're contacted after a decision's been made by a manager or by a player saying, why have I been suspended? I didn't even know I've been charged. And ultimately it comes down to a failure from the club to follow their procedure. All of our correspondence will be through the club secretary, and the responsibility really then is on that secretary to pass it on internally to the individuals involved. All we can really ask is be honest about what happened. It is a chastening experience to have been charged with misconduct. I understand that. We try and look at everything objectively, and this is where club secretaries can help by trying to take that objective view as well, looking at the evidence that we've collected and we've provided, and the statement that may come from the individual that's been charged. Pre-performance may be mitigation for mouthing off at him, telling him what you think, but it doesn't invalidate the charge. If you've used abusive language towards the referee, you may feel you were justified in that. However, the charge is that you've used abusive language towards the referee. If you have told him to F off, then the charge is proven. However, his poor performance may well constitute mitigation. If all of your players and officials get in a confrontation, chances are you'll receive an E20 charge and that the club has failed to ensure that their players and officials conducted themselves in an orderly manner. those charges are relatively straightforward. And if, as I said, if a match is abandoned or if a referee reports that actually in the 86th minute, all 22 players got involved in this mass brawl, are likely to be found proven. Be honest about what happened, be honest with yourselves, but actually we would far rather that a club or an individual accept the charge that's been raised but provide mitigation or show remorse, show reticence and regret for what happened, but accept that they acknowledge that their behaviour was improper and try to explain away why it was fine that I told the referee this, that and the other. Please prepare for a hearing if you do request to attend in person. Make sure you're aware of what the format is. Make sure you're aware that and that the individual's aware that they will have the opportunity to bring witnesses and ask questions to the referee. Again, I've sat in probably over 300 disciplinary hearings at this stage, and it's frustrating from my point of view as a secretary, and I have to stay quiet. But when an individual comes and says, "Oh, I didn't realize I was going to ask questions to the referee. Oh, hang on, can I have 5 minutes to try and think of them?" Or, "Oh, I didn't realize I could bring my teammates to support me in denying this." So that comes down to a fairly from the club to make sure that the individuals attending the hearing are aware of what that format is going to take. So please prep any players or representatives that are going to be attending. Closing off, I actually just want to try and put some of this in context. I've spoken a lot about all the different kinds of charges that we raise here at the county. We have for this season, we've got about 3,600 teams playing. We've got about 35,000 players that we know of through the player registration system. There'll be similar numbers from last season. I just wanted to, again, in the interest of transparency, show you some of the statistics from what we dealt with last year. So last year, we raised 357 charges. The majority of those still come against, or the highest number come as offences against match officials. So we had 135 instances of misconduct against match officials, where there was abusive language, threatening language, physical contact or assault. 1 charges against clubs under FA Rule E20, which okay, some clubs will receive more than 1, but at 500 clubs is, or 600 clubs, sorry, it's concerning that we're actually looking at about 17–18% of our clubs receiving them. 23 charges for playing under suspension. The majority of those were at the beginning of last season. It's been encouraging to note that actually the current season we've only had 2 incidents reported to us of players playing under suspension. Suspensions carried from one season to the next. Some things work there. Charges for aggravated breaches relating to potentially discriminatory comments. Assault charges, player on player. Thankfully, we had no assault charges for a player on a match official, but we did have 10 charges for physical contact on a match official. Those 13 charges combined led to immediate suspensions for the players. And in total, for those serious level offences, we issued suspensions of over 6 years in days-based suspensions for those serious offences. Charges were not proven, which I can't do the maths to work out, but the charges being not proven is always an interesting one. I've had debates with officials at the FA over this. If the FA is doing our job, we should not be having many not proven charges, because we should be making sure that we are investigating reports thoroughly and that we're only proceeding to raise charges when we're satisfied that an offence is likely to have occurred. However, it is, in my mind, right that players feel that they have a fair judicial process, and that actually I would be concerned if not a single charge was not proven, because players would then feel that whether they committed the acts or not, it didn't matter what they said because they would never be given a fair hearing. So I think the fact that we did have 15 charges not proven shows that there is rigour both in our investigation process, because it's a low number, but also in our judicial process, because players and clubs charged with offences will still be given the opportunity to put their case forward. That defence will still be taken into consideration, and where the Commission believes on the balance of probability they did not commit the offence, those charges will be found not proven. Interested in getting involved in some of these, we are actually currently recruiting for independent panel members. This information is available on our website. We are looking to take applications through to the end of November and do training through January. We're really interested to get people involved from all different backgrounds within the football community. in all different parts of the county. For too long, we've kind of had it charged at us that our disciplinary panels are heavily weighted towards the adult male 11v11 game. And we definitely encourage applications from people involved in women's football and futsal, disability football, and small-sided, so that we can expand that knowledge base. And as much as we obviously want variation and diversity in backgrounds, in cultures, and ethnic backgrounds, to make sure we have a rigorous and fair process, as much as anything, we want diversity in thoughts and diversity in football backgrounds. So if you are interested in finding out more, please feel free to give me a call, drop me an email, or complete the application pack, which is on our website. Further resources available on our website, which kind of give more information about some of the topics I've covered here. So we have one-page reference guides relating to aggravated charges, alternate charges, consolidated hearings, misconduct charges, the disciplinary process. We want to make sure that people are prepared and understand what happens when these charges are raised, so that, again, in the interest of fairness, and I keep coming back to this, and I don't apologise for the fact I sound like a broken record on that, but it means that if a player is charged, they understand why we've got to the point where we've raised the charge. They also know how they can respond to it and make sure that they are treated in a fair manner. Information which has been put out by the FA. What used to be the club handbook is now the essential information for clubs. And again, this is available online. We're going to send out a link to all clubs as well with this in the next few days. But I wanted to make sure you guys had the sneak peek, because you've given up more time to kind of give up an evening and listen to me talk about it this evening. The previous sessions for BBFA support are now available on our website as recordings. This one will also join it, hopefully in the next few days, by the start of next week at the latest. First session covering FA rule changes in the disciplinary process, and then the second one looking again at sin bins, law processes. I don't know what happened there. Please log on, take a look, and also offer suggestions around what may come up. This was the last of a package of 3 sessions looking at misconduct, discipline, and so forth. After this, we're going to try and take a much broader view looking around club management. So the next session, second Thursday of November on the 14th, is going to look at volunteer recruitment and management of volunteers within the club. So if you've got any feedback or suggestions, please email me. I'm sure most clubs and leagues have my email address by now. You can also call me on 01235 544 895. You can tweet us at BerksFA, and if you use the hashtag BBFA support, Steph will make sure that I'm aware of it with any recommendations or suggestions or feedback you may have. Before I leave this evening, I just wanted to highlight that the Grassroots Football Survey is out again. This is an annual survey, comes out about this time every year, and it's really your opportunity to have a say about how we're doing. This is something that's sent out and goes back to the FA. It asks all manner of questions about what your experience is like participating in grassroots football, how we're doing as a county, how the FA is doing, what we can be doing differently, and what we can be doing better. Screen and this presentation will be sent out. It's also now on the bottom of all of our email signatures, so if you get anything from us in the next couple of weeks, you can click on the link there. The deadline to provide feedback on that is the 5th of November. And once again, do really encourage everyone to submit that. The feedback we got last year was valuable. It's led to initiatives such as this to try and help clubs navigate FA regulations and share best practice for running clubs in the grassroots environment. You also have the option, you can request a callback if you want to, in which case one of the members of staff will give you a ring so we can discuss any concerns you may have in a bit more detail. From me, bang on an hour once again. Quite proud of that. I'll stay online for a few more minutes. If anybody has any chat or questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. You can send them to me privately. You can send them to everybody if you do want to have anything discussed. Generally would say happy to discuss any general questions you may have about the processes or the regulations, but it would not be appropriate to get involved in discussing individual or cases or specific incidents that may have occurred. We'll take that up through email or by a phone call if you would like me to. Thank you once again for giving up an evening of your time to spend it with me online. Hope that it's proved valuable and informative. Please feel free to share the recordings amongst the club and anyone that may unfortunately get charged with misconduct over the next season. Hopefully it won't happen, but if it does, hopefully this gives you a bit more information about how to respond to it and how to deal with that process, and so you know what you're walking into. Have a question that's come through. Player gets sent off on 21st of September. Assume the suspension starts the following week. Nothing shown on whole game of the club played him, and the referee sent in a report late. Does happen, unfortunately, yes. So, in these instances, clubs should be aware that a suspension for a red card starts 7 days after the charge has been raised. Suspension kicks in automatically whether or not notification has been received from the county. If you logged on to the first BBFA support session a couple of months ago, best practice there that if you're aware a player's received a card and it gets to about the Wednesday and you haven't received any notice from us at the county, to please contact us so that we can chase the referee. So the question is the player suspended from the 28th of September, and the matches he's played, if he played in any after that date, was he suspended and should he be charged? They sent off on the 21st. Suspension kicks in on the 28th. Any matches he has played during that period that he should have been suspended, he has played under suspension. As a county FA, please let us know. Bill, if you can let me know who it is and what the matches were, we'll pick that up tomorrow. And we would look to charge them for playing under suspension. Now, if he's only received a one-game ban, he is only suspended for the match on the 28th. If he then played on the 5th of October or whatever the following weekend was, he is no longer under suspension. The county would only look to take action against him for that game that he should have been suspended for. What we will always do is, once it's heard by a misconduct panel, he will always receive at least one game suspension for the match that he should have played. He may choose to increase it from there. Bill's just told me actually it was an OFA club, so that's brilliant. Music to my ears. Please let Steve Honey know, and I can put that out of my mind. I don't have to worry about it. If you challenge the question here, if you challenge the charge, seems odd to complete a punishment if you're challenging a charge. Jules, I take it that relates to a red card. If you're challenging a red card, there's very tight timeframes for that. We need to know within a matter of days of the card being issued. We will always make sure a panel rules on whether the red card should stand before that automatic suspension kicks in. So in this instance, if the player was sent off on the 21st of September, we would make sure that a panel has considered an appeal for wrongful dismissal or mistaken identity by the 27th of September, so that we can then notify the club and the league ahead of the following week. If the report hasn't come from the county at that time, unfortunately the club is out of time. That is why, if you haven't received a notification, you really need to be contacting us so that we can confirm A, what the offence was, and B, if there is going to be an appeal, we need to make sure we've got all of that through. Unfortunately, lack of notification from the county FA is not mitigating circumstances for missing either the deadline for submitting an appeal for wrongful dismissal or for playing a player under suspension. If you get a red card and you know you're going to challenge it, please contact the relevant county FA as soon as possible so that we can start making arrangements, both in terms of chasing the referee for the report and for scheduling a disciplinary hearing so that it can be considered by that panel. To answer the questions, I know it may not be the answer you wanted to receive. Hopefully it's explained why those timeframes are so tight. I don't see anyone else typing or any more questions, so thank you one and all. I will close the meeting down in a few moments. Wish you all enjoyable rest of the evening, and good luck for matches coming up this weekend. And hopefully see you again next month for the next support session.